Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Clancy Imislund. I'm an alcoholic. I'm very glad to be here tonight. I'm glad to be present at this fine dinner. I spent the afternoon playing volleyball in the hot sun in West LA with a bunch of young guys who I ordinarily, they probably wouldn't want to let me play, except it's my ball. I was captain. I thought, this is really hot. I told Russ, this is really hot. It'll be good to get over to the valley and cool off a little bit. I got out of the car and I just started to cry. Last time I was at a place this hot is when I escaped from the Texas State Nut House in Big Spring, Texas. And I ran across the prairie at top speed with the hot sun. And the trouble in Texas, of course, they can see you running for 3 days out there. It's just a matter of time till the field glasses pick you up. Why, there goes that little Yankee sumbitch now. Snatched me back and gave me 3 months of electric shock treatments for that run. So I don't run from heat anymore. I just kind of walk up here. And thank you very much for turning off that fan. I was so afraid you might get some air up here. I was afraid I was going to get a chill. It isn't really bad coming over. I like it. I know many of you guys, and bad trips are something different. I think I may have mentioned this to a few of you, but 3 or 4 years ago I was speaking in Reykjavik, Iceland. And that's a long trip. You're on Air Iceland, which is something else. Anyway, coming back, and I had about a 4-hour wait in Minneapolis. I had to wait for United Airlines flight to Los Angeles, and I was sitting in the red carpet room and tired, and not very many people left on Sunday night, and I had to go to the can, throw it in this little can, very nice, 2 little stalls next to each other, very neat and tidy, and a couple of urinals, and everything was clean. And I sat in one of the stalls and meditated about things, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden a voice comes from the other stall and says, "Hi there." What is this now? Like, what are you doing tonight? And I thought, uh-oh. So I said, "I'll tell you what, pal, I'm going back to Los Angeles to my wife, my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren. Thanks for asking." I thought that'd do it. Pretty soon the voice says, "We could really have some fun tonight if you wanted to." And I was tired and I overreacted. I said, "I don't know what your problem is, for Christ's sake, but drop it. I'm in here for something else. Why don't you just do what you're here to do and forget it?" There was a long pause, and the guy said, "I'll have to call you back. This asshole in the next stall won't shut up." But that's what I call a bad trip, baby. But anyway, I know we have one young man here in his first 30 days, but several others in their first few months. And we're here to discuss. I'm sure you wonder, as I used to wonder, what's this big deal about staying sober? You know, it doesn't seem that tough sometimes. What's the big deal? They make it sound as though it's so really magic. And I think you ought to know it really is kind of magic, because there's something that most of us don't think about, don't know about. I didn't know about it. But there seem to be types of alcoholics. And there's a type of alcoholic that seems to be an alcoholic by any way you measure them, and something really happens to threaten their security. They may lose a job, maybe a family, somebody dies in the family, and they quit. And they never drink again. And there's all kinds of cases like that. We know people like that. The same type of person if they become addicted to alcohol, in addition to the drinking problem. And it's hard to understand that. Most people don't realize that alcoholic addiction is much more lethal than drug addiction, the withdrawal from it. When you withdraw from drugs, you get terribly sick. When you withdraw from alcohol addiction, you go into convulsions and die many times. And so these are the people for whom treatment centers were originally created. And these people go to treatment centers, and each step of the way, they're medically withdrawn, they understand the nature of their problem, and they come out, and they quit, and they never drink again. Up in Seattle, there's a big famous hospital called Schick Shadell, and they advertise, we will cure your alcoholism in 10 days with 3 follow-up visits. And they do, because that type of alcoholic goes there. And there's another type of alcoholic, which seems to be an alcoholic by the way you measure them. They drink, they have trouble with drinking, can't stop. Something happens that really threatens their security, and they quit. But they always eventually drink again. And the same type of alcoholic comes out of treatment centers with tears of sincerity rolling down their cheeks. I've learned my lesson. But they always eventually drink again. And this is the type of alcoholic that's baffled people for 4,000 years in recorded history. People who just can't, they seem to be stopped, and they always drink again. And there's been, at one time they were possessed by devils. They put them to death, and they flog them and beat them and send them away. And I'll tell you, I'm kind of old, of course, older than probably anyone in the room. But even I'm not that old. But when I was a little boy, they still hadn't found an answer for that type of alcoholic. There still was no answer for it. And they had no chances. They had cures, sanitariums over in the San Fernando Valley. The famous place was Shire's Dryer. And they'd go in there and dry out and go get drunk again. And when this thing started, and eventually Bill Wilson wrote this book, that's what he talks about in the book. He says, alcoholics of our type must do this. And it really is an unusual thing that people are staying sober. It's never been done before. There are more people sober in this room tonight, alcoholics of our type, than probably there were in the world in 1935. It seems incredible on a continuing basis. But you wonder, but what's so difficult about it? What's the big deal? And the big deal is the nature of the illness is such that people like me, and I presume like you, always have that reservation deep in their heart that's ready for when they feel bad. But my case truly is different. It isn't quite like theirs. And you go to AA and you discover certain things, as I did. I went to AA because I had some problems. Well, let me put it this way. Even when I was a boy, there seemed to be something, I thought there's something missing in me. I don't know what the hell it is. But when I get along fine with people at a distance, but up close, they always it's almost as though they see something wrong with me. They don't tell me what it is, but they don't seem to like me as well. And I don't seem to fit in very well. I have some friends, but I don't have a lot of belonging. And I thought, when I grow up, it'll be different. And I grew up and I get to be kind of a successful writer. So I had some money. And it's almost, I thought about this, if you're supposed to feel like this, it seemed to me for one reason or another, I always felt like this, much of the time. Always just something off. And so I had some money. I spent thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis to get to the root of my problems. And I really found out, you think that's funny? God, if Johnny Harris would have said it, he'd have cried. In psychoanalysis, they say you shouldn't go to psychoanalysis. I loved it. I found out ways that I'd been hurt that I never even thought of. I really am pretty much a victim. I was raised in the Norwegian Lutheran Church, a very good church. We all loved it. I mean, it made you feel like something. And later on, I discovered that the Norwegian Lutheran Church had repressed me psychologically. How'd you like to find that out about your own church? I discovered I'd been hurt by the Depression. I didn't even know there'd been a Depression. But when he explained it, I could see it. A lot of things. I just went there to think, Jesus, no wonder I feel crappy. I've had a terrible life. But the one thing I learned why I had all these emotions, why I felt I wasn't quite good enough and didn't fit in, because I'd been victimized by the world. And it took me about a year of paying for this before I realized I still feel the same way. I just know why. But the only time you could use that information is late at night in a bar somewhere. Some big moose comes up and says, I'm going to listen to you all night. What the hell's wrong with you? Then you can tell them. I was repressed by the door, which was the church. Boom. I read books. I like to read books. I sat in little cult meetings of imitation intellectuals and discussed deep things we didn't know how to pronounce and all sorts of things. But I'll tell you, the one thing that saved my bacon is when I was 15 years old, early in the Second World War. I was not comfortable. I'll tell you, I think about that sometimes now. I don't talk about it much, but when I was shoved ahead in school a year and a half. I mean, I was a year and a half ahead of it. So I went from being a peer to being smaller than everybody, which I think started making me being a smart aleck or a Weisenheimer. But I lived in a very strong structure in my home, in my church, in a school. We didn't know any better. We just structured and you do it. And I got straight A's, and I was doing great when I was 12 years old. And my parents got a divorce. Now, if you can believe this if you're young, it sounds so hard to believe. I had never heard of a divorce. Nobody in our church ever had a divorce. Nobody in our family ever had a divorce. I mean, they explained it to me what it was, obviously. But I almost instantly began doing the worst thing you could do. And I didn't know it because I had no idea. I seemed to have a flair for doing the wrong thing. I began playing my mother against my father to avoid discipline, to avoid structure. When my mother gave me hell, I'd run to my dad. When my dad gave me hell, I'd run to my mother. When they both gave me hell, I'd run to my grandma. And I fooled them and outsmarted them again and again and again and again. By the time I was 15, I was flunking out of school. I didn't have any friends that I liked very well. Everything was just terrible in my life. And I don't know what the hell would have become of me. And what saved me is the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. Because that took my mind off everything for a while. I was sitting in movies every chance I got to watch them, the Japs and all these things. And one day I decided that's what I should do. I should run away and go fight the war. Now, I don't know if there's anybody in this room old enough to remember the Second World War except me. But I'll tell you something. You missed something. You missed something. You missed seeing a country united against an enemy. That was such a great... Everybody was on the same page, you know. Everybody, parents, when their kids went off to war, they put a blue star in their window. And if their kid got killed, it became a gold star. But they were proud. Everybody parades and all sorts of things. And it was just, you know, you didn't think, there wasn't any, when people came home, they had parades and thanked them, and not the stuff we've had in recent wars. But that's why I want to get up there and get part of this. Because some of the kids I knew older than me, they came home in their Marine Corps uniforms. I thought, I'll get over there and I'll be a Marine and I'll kill some Japs. So I told my mother I'm going to go to Duluth, Minnesota to visit my aunt, and she packed my little bag and gave me bus fare. And I got a guy to give me a ride to Minneapolis. And then I decided to hitchhike to San Francisco. They said that's where you'd get it. And I remember, I never hitchhiked before. I was this tall, dumb, face full of pimples, just an idiot. And the car stops. Where are you going, kid? I said, San Francisco. So am I. Hop in. Turned out he was in the Navy going back to a ship. I don't know why he picked me up. He just listened to my prattle all the way across the country. At night we'd stop. There were no motels then. He'd give me a bed what the hell they call them? Huh? I just said there were no motels, you idiot. Stay out of the sun, Mike. The trailer court, that's what I was trying to think of. And he bought my meals, and I never thought I'd think about it. I never hitchhiked before. I just thought, you tell people where you're going to go, and they get you there. You know, that's all I know. I said, I want to be in the Marine Corps to kill Japs. He said, kid, you're a little small. Your face full of pimples. You look very young. You look younger than you're 15 even. He said, but I'll tell you what you do. I think you should try to get in the Merchant Marine for now. Because they're crying, all the good guys go in the Navy, and maybe they'll take almost anybody warm. Now, I'm going to show you how to get to this place on Market Street. And you go there, and the Coast Guard office tell me on. And I went there. I want to be in the Merchant Marine. Fill out this application. And he told me to put down 16, not 15. I put down 16. I said, well, you're only 16, kid. You have to have your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And that day they issued me Siemens papers right there. They were just crying for it. Another guy and I sat down in some union hall where we signed something for something, I don't know what. Took us to the ship. That afternoon we were on a load of torpedo warheads going to the South Pacific. And it really was fun for about an hour. tailed off. And, guy said, that's Treasure Island. That's where the World's Fair was last year. Oh, that's Alcatraz. That's the Golden Gate Bridge. Oh. And there's nothing after that. And they said, get to your cabin. I didn't see any cabins on that ship. What they call a room was a cabin. Cabins in Wisconsin got oak and logs and things. But I got this room, and 3 of the worst type of people that any small, skinny, dumb Norwegian Lutheran puke could ever be with. And these people are called men. What the hell are you doing? I now know why they were so upset, because the work crews divided into what they call watches. That's a group of men who work together. And there were 4-man watches, and I was their 4th man. And they realized they'd just been screwed for that trip, But I told them a joke that I was used to go over good in study hall. Didn't go over good there at all. Why you get your bunk and shut up? I still remember that, the ship moving around like this. Oh, God. And I was hot, and I wanted my mother. And the guys start talking, laughing. They'd been in San Francisco for 3 or 4 days with the ship. And I couldn't believe my ears, what I was hearing. These guys, I was in a room with big-time sinners. I mean, big-time sinners. I had committed some sins. I had sometimes forgotten to keep your Sabbath day holy. And I didn't always honor my mother and my father. And I've said bad words sometimes. But these guys were a big deal. I mean, they were dirty. They were done dirty, terrible sexual things. And even at the age of 15 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I'd had sex. But I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. And these guys were... I couldn't believe my ears. These guys were doing it with people. But I eventually became the ship fool after a couple of days. I found a niche, Hey, kid, down in the engine room, tell them we need a left-handed wrench. Hey, kid, go up on the bridge, tell the captain we need some elbow grease. And they'd laugh, and they all drank whiskey after the watch. They weren't supposed to have whiskey on the ship. These guys would have been pirates in any other era, And I just laid in my bunk and thought, my God, how am I ever going to get out of this place? I suddenly realized they all had black hair. Those are the Catholics I'd heard about. And these guys would drink whiskey and talk dirty, and I just hated it. One day, one of the guys turned to me and says, "How about you, Junior? You think you're man enough for a little snort?" He shoved the bottle right in my face. And I drew the line there, because I might be dumb, and I'm kind of afraid, but I'm not going to take that. And I decided to just demolish him. I was going to say, "Listen, you take that bottle and take it away from my face. You may not know this, but I'm a Norwegian Lutheran, and I promised my mother and grandmother I would never drink whiskey, and I never will. And I know what kind of a sinner you are, but don't ever put that whiskey in my face again." I was just going to nail him with that. And he said, "Why do you think you're man enough?" And I heard the voice say, "Goddamn right." So I had my first drink of whiskey out of the first bottle I was ever close to. And it burned my mouth and my throat and my stomach and my throat and my mouth and his shirt finally. Get the bottle away, go son of a bitch. And all the way across the all the way across the Central Pacific, when nobody was around, every day I'd snuck in one of those guys' sea bags and get a drink of whiskey. And I hated it. And I'd throw it up and have to wipe it up. But I had some kind of a feeling that if I didn't throw up, they'd think I was a man. Nothing would have made them think I was a man. I didn't know that then. And I'd drink it, throw it up, and it's just terrible. We're coming into Pearl Harbor now. They're still digging up ships. And it's the night before my 16th birthday. And I'm down there taking a drink of that crap again. And I stayed down. Then I couldn't breathe very well. Then all of a sudden something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. And I didn't know it at the time. I only know it in retrospect. But it did something remarkable for me. It was the first time, I suppose, in retrospect, I ever felt the way men looked. What a good feeling. And also that scale goes away. Just goes away. You know? Hey, baby. And the next day they took me to Honolulu and got me 2 or 3 bottles of beer, and I got drunk, and they laughed, and I laughed. No big deal. And that was I had discovered something that made me feel good. And I didn't think anything about it because, you know, I've always envied people who have breakthroughs, and you hear them talk. Heard a guy say, and I held that first drink down. I knew I'd gone into a new garden of experience, with flowers and fruits to be savored, until the day came the fruits and flowers soured in my lips, and I came to this wonderful program. I wish I'd known that. All I knew is if you don't puke and you can breathe, it makes you feel good. I learned to smoke on that ship. Nobody in my family smoked. They all smoked. I smoked and puked and smoked and puked. One day I smoked and didn't puke, and I smoked 2.5 or 3 packs a day for 40-some years after that. And in fact, I hurt my throat. In 1985, I was directing the flag ceremony at the International Convention in Montreal. And I screamed at these people. There's no PA system. And they were all over the field. I was screaming at the rehearsal. This one fool from Poland just made me crazy. Because what they were supposed to do is you name the country, Yugoslavia. And this guy from Poland said, Poland. Said, no, you son of a bitch, just dip the flag. And I kept screaming and yelling, and I blew out my throat. I did it with love. And I came back, and the guy says, you've really ruined the bottom of your vocal cords. We're going to have to take out a third of your vocal cords. And I did. It's so funny. My doctor had said to me and he said, if I were you, I wouldn't smoke anymore, because I don't think smoking caused this, but it could really make it bad. You might go mute. And he'd been telling me for 5 years for me to smoke is to die. I say, yeah, I know. It's going to kill me. He just had to tell me once, you may go mute. And that was in 1985 or so, a long time ago. But I'm still a smoker by nature. If the doctor told me next week, you've got 30 days to live, my first stop would be to get a carton of cigarettes. I don't really want them, but if I had a reason to smoke them, I'd love to smoke them. They're very soothing. And it hurts me the way people treat smokers today. You know, smokers in our society, just like you drive down the street in rainy days and here's these poor bastards outside of every door with don't smoke in the building. You know better than that. Pretty soon they'll have a bell. Unclean, unclean, you know. And what's even worse, people come up to you, strangers can come up to you and denounce you for smoking. That happened to me when I was still smoking in the early 80s. A woman comes in, why do you smoke? Don't you realize secondhand smoking is killing all of us? Screw you, you know. But that's not much of an answer. And I finally devised an answer to that. If anybody gives you any crap, if any smokers are here, and people give you crap about smoking, I've devised an answer. I haven't had a chance to use it for 20 years, 15 years, 20 years. But you put this in your arsenal. When some old bag comes up and says, why do you smoke? Here's what you say. Why do I smoke? I have a feeling that one of these days they'll find a market for phlegm and I'll be rich. They will never ask you again. But later on, I made some more trips. I went in the Navy finally when I was old enough. And then the war was at the Naval Hospital up in Northern California being sewed together. They passed around some tests. And I did very good on tests. I'm a reader. So they gave me a high school diploma. I'm still a junior in high school. In fact, next month, at the end of this month, I'm going to my 62nd class reunion. And I hope they all look terribly old. I'm going to try to look prim But I never did graduate from high school. But they gave me a diploma, and I went to the University of Wisconsin after the war. Met a girl in college, got married, and out in the world became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer, which is to this day my best job I ever had. I liked it the best. But my wife I'd married a Catholic in a moment of weakness. I'd never seen anyone with black hair before. And she began turning out children as Catholics do, and I had to get her better jobs. You know, it's a funny thing if you're young today. It's hard to realize this. Here I was, married to a girl, and I remember saying to her, "Can't we use birth control?" No. But if she'd have said yes, I don't know what I'd have done. Because people didn't talk about those things then. You know, I'd been overseas, I'd been through a major university, and I think I heard the word condom once in my life. In a Navy training film, it showed this voluptuous woman and explained what would happen if you didn't wear a condom. And I didn't care what would happen. Shit, what you would find then is kids, is kind of bad kids who say things like, "I got a rubber." And even they would be ashamed to go in and buy them. They'd have to hire somebody to go in and buy them. And they'd be ashamed to go in and say, "Hey, give me a pack of cigarettes and some rubbers." Now look how much progress we've made in the last 50 years. The Rite Aid drugstore at my house, kids come in and say, "Hey, give me some condoms and some cigarettes." But so I had to get better jobs. I got in advertising and big corporations sometimes. And all these years I drank and raised hell. I thought about that some. You know, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here ever, really. But you can't pick up the paper these days without somebody being molested, kids being molested by clergymen or parents or teachers or passersby or whatever. It's just everybody's always been molested. And I think about my experience. Here I was, 15 years old, absolutely stupid, hitchhiked all the way across the country, got in a ship with the worst element in the history of the world, just and never was molested once. It makes you feel unattractive. But I had a tendency sometimes, because drinking to me is a great experience. It gets rid of that scale. I have a lot of fun. Great. The only problem is I have a tendency to drink a little too much sometimes. And I act bizarrely. And some people suggest I go to this new thing in town called Alcoholics Anonymous. So I said, okay. He said, some of the town drunks are cutting down. Maybe you won't act bizarrely after you go there. I said, okay. So I went to this room, and 8 fat guys sitting around a table. I said, "What are you doing here?" And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I found out later there wasn't anybody in that state within 20 years of my age. You know, like somebody coming in 12 now and saying I'm an alcoholic. And I said, I don't know. Some people thought I ought to come over here and go to your meetings. "Really? Are you an alcoholic? You think you're an alcoholic?" And I tried to be honest. I said, "No, I don't think I'm an alcoholic at all." "What do you think your problem is?" "Frankly, I think I'm too sensitive." Listen to this one, Earl. But I sat in those meetings for a few weeks and understood if you're new to that, you know what alcoholics are. Alcoholics are people whose problem is alcohol. And when it gets bad enough, they come to AA and they admit their problem is alcohol, and they return to God and turn their will over to God and live happily ever after. And none of those things are possible for me, for several reasons. One is that my problem is not alcohol. I mean, these guys, if you're an alcoholic, you can't quit. When you start drinking, you must drink to the end. Not me. I've quit a lot of times, with remorse many times, but I've always quit. My problem has never been, I can't quit. My problem is this. When I stop, I'm fine. But the next day, or the day after that, pretty soon, somebody seems to sneak into my bedroom in the middle of the night and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day they start to tighten it. And it doesn't come out as, I need a drink. It comes out as just a little growing restlessness, a little not feeling too well, and getting people still giving you the damn lectures about your drinking when you're not even drinking. And people give you a lot of crap, and you start to realize the world is kind of a crappy place, really, when you can see it clearly, and on, and it mounts and mounts. And I've done a lot of things. I've got a psychiatrist and read books and prayed. Didn't pray much, but I did a lot of things. But I'll tell you what cuts that feeling is 2 or 3 drinks. That's why I drink. I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink because I'm a feeler. When that scale comes back, I hate it. Then sometimes I drink too much again. And they say, see, your problem was alcohol, wasn't it? You have to say, yeah, I guess it was. But inside you just want to shriek, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It's jerks like you and other people that screw me around. But you can't say that. You have to say, yeah, I guess it was. And you drink until you have to quit again next time and go through the same procedure. And all these years I drank and tried. Tonight when they were reading chapter 3, I was listening. There's a phrase in there that describes one of the things alcoholics of our type have in common. Because if you're new, you look around, what do we got in common? All different sizes and shapes and colors, and we all got a different history of drinking. But the one thing alcoholics of our type seem to have in common, we find out, all of us have somehow along the way have to accept the obsession that somehow, someday, I will control and enjoy my drinking. And it says, this obsession is amazing. Many of us pursued the gates of insanity and death. And people say, why would you do all that? What are you making such a big deal about? And I don't know how to explain it. But it's like it goes back to that same thing. Alcoholics of our type always eventually drink again. And people can't understand why. And you may not know the scientific efforts to make people like us stop, but I'm sure you've seen what I've seen. The face of somebody who loves you, and that terrible look of disappointment again. And, oh gosh, how could you? You were doing so well, and you promised, and you're doing good, and now look at you. And there's no answer to that except leave me alone. Leave me alone, God damn it. Stop nagging me. Because I feel bad. I feel worse than you do, but I don't know how to say it. And this strange phenomenon happens again and again. I moved to a different city, and I got a job in a big corporation called Fairbanks Morris, working in their advertising department, and I did very well. Except I got drinking, because I need to drink, to feel good. And sometimes I drink too much, and I get in trouble. I may miss a day of work here or there, get some. And I got called in the personnel office. They said, you know, Clancy, you do nice work, but we can't have you here if you're going to keep drinking like this. And I had a golden idea that changed my life. I said, AA was not very well known then. I said, gee, Mr. Wilson, I think you're right. I have a drinking problem. I didn't know it. Probably something happened to me in the war. It hadn't been overused at that time. But they got this new thing in town called Alcoholics Anonymous. Would you let me go there a couple of weeks and see if I could do something about my drinking? And he said, yes, that's a good idea. We don't know much about it, but I'm sure it'll help you. We'd love to have you as our staff. And you could also go home and say to your wife, well, I've gone back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Wonderful. Wonderful. What do they want you to do, honey? Well, they want me to taper off. And there wasn't any Al-Anon then to screw it up for everybody. Ever since the birth of Al-Anon, there's never been any rest for anybody anywhere. No, they don't want you to taper off. You have to stop completely. We use the same stuff you do. I release you, you son of a bitch. It gave me a couple of weeks to look for a new job anyway. And I went up and down, and I did this again and again, because I could write pretty well. I'd knock in bed for a while, and pretty soon I'd get in trouble, and then ask for permission to go to AA, and I'd go to sit in another town, listen to that same old crap. Turn it over to God, your life will be wonderful. Oh, Jesus. I used to think, how I envy your stupidity. I wish I could have been born dumb like you assholes, but I'm not. And I went up and down, up and down, up and down. All my kids have been born in a different state. I went down in Texas finally, and I didn't come back up. I didn't realize that I was working for a big firm called Tracy Locke, biggest advertising agency, and I was working writing the LC and Elmer ads for the Borden Company, and I was doing great, except I missed work, and I cost them a big account, and they fired me. Not only fired me, but they called my wife a day in advance and told her they were going to do it. Her name at that time was Poor Charlotte. Somebody ought to call Poor Charlotte. Yeah, sure, do that. So when I was getting fired, she packed up the kids and moved out. And they repossessed the car. And they told me I couldn't go back in my house again. And all of a sudden on Monday, I was a hot shot, I thought, in an advertising agency. And Friday, I was standing in the streets of Dallas holding my bags and no place to go. And I couldn't believe this. And I called a few people around that I thought were my friends, and they They had no time for me. I'd burned them all off. And one guy I had left, he said, look, I got to deliver a car to Los Angeles. You think you could drive it out there for me? I said, oh, Christ, yes. Because I'm on kind of probation from this state hospital. So I got the car, got to El Paso the first night, 600 miles, and got drunk with some friends in Juarez and had a good time. And I'm big in Juarez, I'll tell you that. What you want to do is stand on the bar at the Chinese Palace and sing, Yo soy el maestro de los locos en Chihuahua. El gringo! And the only thing wrong with that is occasionally you go to jail. And I'll tell you, for anybody here who has not been in a Mexican jail, let me give you one piece of advice. Do not shake at those bars and say, I'm an American! You sons of bitches, I'm an American! Do you hear me? Because they don't care. Some little guy in a gray uniform comes by and says, hey, gringo, silencio. But the next day I got in the car and I drove to Phoenix. I got drunk again in Phoenix and lost the car. Never have found it. All my clothes, all my ID, everything I had in the world was in that car. And I couldn't find it. I was drunk, didn't know anybody in Phoenix. I got in a beef on the street corner. The guy turned out to be a cop and he threw me in jail overnight. The third floor. Oh, God, I woke up at midnight so sick. And no air conditioning at that time in the jail, 115 degrees maybe at midnight. So I'd have to vomit. Went over and vomited. Turned out not to be the toilet. It was a guy's bunk, actually. He was not in it. It wasn't that. But it made me feel better, so I laid down next to his bunk and put my face on the cool tile and went to sleep. This guy came back from where he was. Saw his bunk full of puke, and here's me laying there. You drunken son of a bitch! He kicked my front teeth out. And that was one morning I was really glad I'd been in psychoanalysis. I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking, this son of a bitch is overreacting. But I didn't want to say anything and make trouble. And the next day I hit the streets. They let me go. Here I am, blood and vomit. And I couldn't think of anybody. I'll tell you, when you are that bad, there's only one place you can go in the world, to an AA club. That's the only place. The worse you look, the better they like it. Oh, you're home, son. Oh, thank you, Ellen. And I hustled some old lady for $20, ostensibly for a 12-step hospitalization ticket, bought a bus ticket to Los Angeles. Had a guy at KFWB, I'd given him a start years before, and he gave me over $100. It'd be a lot of money then. And I drank that up and came back one morning. He said, no, I called Dallas. You didn't have a car accident like you told me. You're a liar. You're a bum. And I just, on the streets again. I was so sick, I didn't know where to go. And a couple of days later, two big guys threw me out of the Midnight Mission down on Skid Row. So I never heard of it, but I heard of it. And stay out of here, you mooch! I tried to explain to him, I'm not a mooch. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the LC numbers are running this very weekend in Life and Time and New Yorker. It's already being posted. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. But it's really hard to explain these things in midair. And I stood outside of that damn old club, that damn old mission I met on the corner of 4th and Los Angeles. It was raining and cold, end of October, sick. My mouth was bleeding again. My clothes were torn. I couldn't think of anybody I could call. I couldn't even call my mother because my stepfather was so tired of watching me play on her emotions so she'd go to her tiny bank account and send her little boy some more money. He would not put the calls through to her anymore. And I thought I was going to die in that street. And if some guy had come up to me that morning and said, you know, Slim, you're dying. Maybe you ought to go back to AA. And I'd say, what for? I'm not an alcoholic. I wish I were an alcoholic. I wish that was my problem. I wish I could stop drinking and feel better, but you don't understand, I would have to say. There's something wrong inside of me. There's something wrong inside of me. I don't know what it is. And I knew I had to get off that street corner. There's only one place you go and you look that bad. I said to some other mooch down there, I said, where's the AA club here in Los Angeles? He said, well, the big club is out in Wilshire and Fairfax. I said, where in the hell is that? He said, well, Wilshire doesn't come all the way down here. You have to go up this hill to Hill Street, cut over to Wilshire, walk west till you come to Fairfax. I remember doing that. It was raining. I counted later in my car, 7 years later, about 7 miles. That's a long way to walk when you're so sick and you're remember walking up Wilshire Boulevard vaguely, these nice big cars coming by, and people pointing at me and laughing. I got to this AA club and same old crap. Welcome, son, you're home. Oh, shit. But I went in there and I pretended to be, and I lurked in there that day. That night there was a meeting and I ate about 4 pounds of cake because I could chew that. Then they had a meeting on gratitude and I almost puked it up again. And everybody went home and here I am with the manager. He says, you have to leave, son. We have to close the club. I thought, I'm going to die on that street tonight. So I put on my newcomer look. I said, I'm a newcomer and I have no place to stay. Could you help me? He said, you're in luck, kid. A guy named Joe Quinn left an old 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. Doesn't run, but it's dry. You can sleep in that. You want me to sleep in an abandoned car? Good deal, huh? Yeah, it really was. I love that. And I slept in that damn old car. I still remember that vaguely, my mouth bleeding and feeling so bad. The next morning I went to the club. It turned out to be Sunday morning. They had a spiritual meeting. I ate some cake. Somebody gave a talk on God or something I just couldn't bear to hear. Because by this time, I had broken all 10 commandments. And I had one belief. If God exists, I am damned. So I got to believe God doesn't exist, whatever it takes. And I lurked around that club, and that night there was another meeting, and I went to the meeting, slept in that damn abandoned car. That night kept raining, and I went. The guy, the manager of the club says, you know, you're supposed to be a member to be in here during the daytime, but you're such a mess, you can come in here, but don't ask anybody for money, and don't try to get anything out of anybody. And I remember laying in that car and thinking, maybe I'm dead. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe this is what hell is. Maybe it isn't fire and brimstone. Maybe it's just being sick and your mouth hurts and you bleed on your shirt. And everywhere you go, you hear people behind you laughing at you and ridiculing you. And there's no hope anywhere. It might be this way for eternity. Jesus. And that week was my sobriety date. I would have ever guessed it. I would have no idea. Why in the hell I didn't want to stay sober. You know, they say your desire to stop drinking. I had stayed sober once, and I had stayed sober. I used to go to jail every once in a while overnight. I'm no big criminal or felon, but when I get to a certain stage of drinking, I find it necessary to counsel police officers and tell them they're fascist pigs and they're doing their job wrong. So I've spent several nights overnight in jail, and I got after a while I could come home and take a shower and go to work, and nobody even knew it. This one morning I got out of jail and. I said, gee, you should have stayed home last night because your little son died and we couldn't find you and we were out drunk. And it almost crazed me. Because I had some little girls and one little boy and he was the apple of my eye. And Jesus, I couldn't stand it. Almost went crazy. We went up to Wisconsin to bury him. And I put my hand in his casket. I said, when nobody was around, I said, John Imislund, this will never happen again. Our family will do better and your death will not go in vain. I went back to Texas and I stopped drinking. And I had no desire to stop drinking. I mean, I didn't have any desire to drink at all. And I played with my kids. I went playing with my daughter, Mary and Christy, and feeling good and laughing, and first time in a long time. And everything was fine. And we'd say our little prayers for John when we ate dinner. Then one night, somebody snuck into my bedroom and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day it started. A little irritability, a little nervousness, thinking, God. And then it took this form. This stinking God that everybody's so proud of took my little son who never committed a sin in his life and killed him to punish me. Screw you, son of a bitch! And it got mounted and pretty soon I was saying, Mary, take your sisters and go to your room. Let me alone. I'm sorry. Jesus, I feel, no, tomorrow we'll it just got bad. And I just hated my job. I hate to get up no more. Just day after day, it just got worse. And one day my wife took the children to Mass and I parked the car in the garage, hooked up a hose in the exhaust pipe, turned the motor and went to sleep and died. I didn't know what to do. I was just crazy. The guy next door was watching this and noticed I didn't come out of the car, didn't come out of the garage, so he walked over there and found me dead in the car, pulled me out, beat my chest, and breathed in my mouth. They rushed me to the hospital, determined I was seriously mentally ill and committed me to the state insane asylum for an indefinite period. And I escaped briefly, as I said before. They brought me back, and that added the electric shock treatments. And I didn't get out of there until the next year. I'll tell you something. That is almost a resume buster. That's why we learned the phrase, what did you do this year? I was self-employed. But that's how I get when I stop drinking, folks. There's no chance I'm ever going to stop drinking with all this AA malarkey. And I always think, why did I stop drinking? And it really boils down to this. One of the things I had to do to be able to go to the club in the daytime was sit in their stupid meetings at night and listen to these idiots. But in those meetings, I saw a guy that I had seen in the movies. He just had a small part, but he was a movie actor. Now, what does movie actor say to you? Rich, famous. I thought, maybe he needs a new friend. And I kind of warmed up to him, but he didn't like it. But they started on me again. Time to get a sponsor. Better get a sponsor, kid. And I was living this abandoned car, no going nowhere. So I said, Bob, to the actor, I said, Bob, would you be my sponsor? I want what you have. He said, sure, kid. I'll be your sponsor. But I want you to do what I tell you. I've often thought about that. I found out later he'd only been in 3 movies, and I've seen 2 of them, oddly enough. I've been in many more movies than he ever was, but they said he wasn't a very good actor. He was a good actor because he pretended to be nice in the meetings. He turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig. Like Ted. And he just, I want you to do this. Now I thought, why am I taking this crap from this guy? Because he was my only meal ticket out of there as far as I could see. And I found out later he didn't like me. And I don't blame him, because I was the worst, I don't want to brag, but I was the worst type of newcomer there ever is in AA. And I know it's the worst, because I've sponsored a couple of them. The people, when they walk in a room and say hi, you just wish you had a gun. Here, boom! Here's your goddamn hi, take that, you know. I'll tell you what kind of people they are. They are people who are around AA and know all about it, but keep drinking and coming back to the meetings and want attention. I got drunk again, but I'm back. I'm a newcomer. I'll raise my hand. And you can't tell them anything they don't already know. Remember, Bob took a quotation he told me out of the book, and then described it. And I had to tell him, Bob, that's very interesting, but you misquoted the book. That really makes people crazy. When he tried to help me, he'd take me with him sometimes in meetings. He'd talk to me. And he tried to be a nice guy, but he wasn't any great brain. And I heard him say one thing one night. I don't know if he was saying it to me or somebody else. But I heard him say something even more stupid than usual. He says, as long as you think your problem is alcohol, you're going to die drunk. What the hell is that, Bob? We're supposed to know our problem is alcohol to stay here. What the hell? Why do you say that thing that embarrassed me for? He said, that's the point, kid. If your problem is alcohol, you shouldn't even be in AA. I said, oh, Jesus, Bob. This some Screen Actors Guild breakthrough, for Christ's sake? Makes sense. He said, no, now listen, kid. If your problem is alcohol, here's what you do. You quit drinking and clean up your act. I said, I've done that 100 times. It doesn't work. He said, that's right. Because apparently your problem is not alcohol. It's something that sounds like alcohol, but it isn't. It's something called alcoholism. I said, oh, Jesus, Bob. Don't play word games with me. I look stupid, but I'm very smart. Alcoholism, hooray, I'm cured. Shut up, he explained. Then he gave me a long talk on that subject that most of it I tried to forget, but some of it I remembered because it changed my life. If you're kind of new tonight, if you hear nothing else in this crap I give you, listen to this. He said, the problem is this. If you have an alcohol problem, you stop drinking, you clean up your act. There's a type of alcohol that can do that, and they never drink again. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, which unfortunately for you and me looks almost exactly the same to the naked eye, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding, eventually fatal thing called alcoholism, you will discover that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to make it so painful you can't stand it. I said, Jesus, Bob, nobody ever told me that before. They'll say if you stop drinking, it's going to get better. He says, it doesn't. It always gets worse. Well, if that's the case, why do these people drink alcohol? They know it's going to do terrible things to them. He said, that isn't the point at all. He said, you've been around AA, think you know so much all these years? You understand that alcoholics are people who get an unnatural reaction to alcohol? I said, yes, I've heard that 100 times. He said, you know what that reaction is? Yes, of course. When you drink, it sets up the phenomenon of craving and you can't stop. He said, no, that's podium talk. The unnatural reaction is this. He had a bottle of water like this, or he had a cup of coffee, I guess. He said, understand this, kid. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly changes the way things look. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly changes my relationship to the world around me. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly makes me taller and more self-contained, and them smaller and less frightening. I said, Jesus, Bob, what's wrong with that? And my sponsor said to me, because it isn't really happening, you asshole. It's all in your head. He says, and then you do drink, and you keep drinking because it's doing something special for you. Then you run across this phenomenon of craving. I don't understand it, nor do anybody else does either, but it seems to work. I've thought about that many times. You know, nobody's ever described the phenomenon of craving. But in my experience and what I've seen in myself and others, I think it's something like this, at least for people like me. When you really need a few drinks to feel better, and you have a few drinks, it's great. And there's almost an instant dip. So you take another drink to hold it. You take another drink to hold it. And you get to the point, you see old guys so drunk they can't walk, say, give me a drink, give me a drink. They don't want to drink. They're trying to hold it somehow, but you can't hold it. You eventually get so drunk, you have to get sober. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's happened to me a lot. But now you know that alcohol is going to kill you. Why would you drink it now? He said, that's the other part of it, kid. That's the other part of it. When people are born, you grow up, you learn to live in the world, face conflicts you have to find an answer to, find problems, life's problems you got to find solutions to. You find problems you want to stay out of, things you want not to get into, things that are good for you, things you don't like. He said this whole process is called maturing. And if you become a mature individual, you live pretty comfortably. You get along with people, you hold a job, get along with your kids, no big problems. He says, this almost never happens to alcoholics. I said, why not, Bob? He said, because people like us, when we run across problems, we don't work for the solution. We drink them away. Here's to you, household finance. Here's to you, bitch. I never liked you anyway. Hey, Mr. Collins, why don't you take your job and shove it up your ass? And it really helps, except you gradually built up a closet full of conditioned reflexes to emotional stimuli. You don't know that, of course. But then the day must come for me, and it does for people like us. Okay, enough of this crap. Enough of being treated like a second. I'm going to straighten out. I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to make some dough, take care of the kids. I'm going to go to work every day, get along with the neighbors. I'm not going to act crazy. And never once knowing it is impossible. Because sooner or later, someone will trigger one of my emotional responses. Someone will hurt my feelings. And I'll have to react, get even with them, or make some problems. Someone else will make me feel less than, and I'll have to get out of them. And the emotions start, and I'm trying hard, day after day. And that pressure goes on. And eventually the time comes where I got to get some goddamn relief, and it's not my fault. And I have a few drinks. And sometimes I drink too much. Then I have to get sober. But never once understanding that my emotions are going to rule me. When the intellect and the emotions are in conflict, strong emotions, the emotions will always eventually win. It's almost though the intellect gets tired and walks away, but the emotions never do it. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's the story of my life. I've been doing that for 15 years. What did I do about it, Bob? Why would I do that? He said, there's a name for people like you. I thought, what is that, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic. I thought, my God, I'm an alcoholic. I had all sorts of ideas what an alcoholic would have been in prison and all these things. And it really boils down to this. An alcoholic. I said, Jesus, Bob, why doesn't AA describe it the way you describe it? Instead of this allergy of the body and obsession of the mind and all that crap. He says, they do, kid. Look over there on the wall, right after number 1. they ask you to admit you're having a problem with alcohol. Then there's a dash, which in the English language means end of thought, beginning of new thought. And you also have to admit you're having problems without alcohol. I said, huh. That was December of 1958, a long time ago. I haven't had a drink. My early sobriety, boy, I'll tell you, it was tough because I didn't get along well. I had a bad mouth, and I had an irritating manner, and I aggravated people a lot. And there were a lot of times I felt bad enough to drink. But I thought, if I drink, it's going to be all over. So I gave myself permission to commit suicide, but I would not drink. But if it got bad enough, and several times it got bad enough to drink, but never quite enough to commit suicide. And little by little, I got to feel that my sponsor seemed to know how I feel. And I could confess some of my secrets to him, my secret sicknesses, like I'm not good enough and I don't fit in. And who wants to talk about that? Strong personalities don't mind talking about their weaknesses. But guys that are secretly weak hate to talk about it. And little by little, I came to believe in what he said. And I got some jobs and lost them, jobs and lost them. When I was 2 years sober, I finally got a little job as a beginning writer in a medical corporation. Same kind of job I'd had years before. But I was so glad to get it. And about the fourth day there, somebody hurt my feelings. And I was about to say, fuck you, and quit my job. But I'd promised I'd call Bob. Hey, Bob, this son of a bitch is on me. And he told me what actions to take. I said, that's sell it out. He said, that's what you got to do. And I did it, and it worked. Must have done this 50 times the next 2 or 3 years. By the time I was 5 years sober, I was director of advertising for that corporation. Had front teeth, smiled a lot. If there's anybody here who's lost teeth, let me give you some hope. Once you become spiritually pure, they grow back. When I was 7 years sober, some of you guys may be old enough to remember this. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I created Boss Radio for KHJ, became the #1 hard rock station in the world. 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations for an oil company. 15 years sober, I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. Shit. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Leaped out of their post office box, rushed to my side, attached themselves to me like a group of starving chiggers. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Somebody gave me a book on the rhythm system. That ended all that. And they're all grown up now. 3 of my daughters are turned 17 this year in AA. And the other kids are alcoholics. They may be, but they don't seem to be. And only one of my kids has turned out bad. You hate to talk about things like that. But my oldest daughter has become a judge. We so wanted a defense attorney, but no. She comes home at Christmas. She says, Daddy, remember when you little girls used to yell at us and make us go to our room? I said, sure, honey. She says, when you come to Albuquerque, I'm going to send you to a little room. But my sponsor got me to do the steps little by little. But I'll tell you one other thing. I want to say this quickly, then we'll get that out of here. One thing, if you're kind of new, you may run across what I ran across. I was sober. I knew I was an alcoholic. But then I started, time to do the steps. And I tried to explain to Bob, I can't return to God. I cannot. I wish I could, but I cannot. I happen to know more about God than most people in AA, and I know that a man like me cannot face God. If God exists, I'm dying. He says, nothing in AA says you got to return to God. Oh, to a power greater than myself, Bob. Does that fool the others? I know who the hell they're talking about. He says, it doesn't say that either. Read the damn thing. It says, you came to believe in something. You got to come to believe in something. Can't you believe in God? And I said, no, I can't. He said, can't you believe in AA? I said, well, I like it better than I used to, but not much. He says, do you think I'm doing better than you are? I said, of course you are, Bob. He said, congratulations. I'm your new higher power. And he became a higher power. And people around the club used to say, there's that crazy bastard who thinks his sponsor's God. I knew he wasn't God. He couldn't send me to hell. He tried to, but he couldn't. But I came to believe in him. And over a period of time, he took that faith and got me to do some things. But here's what I want to explain to you. That step came to believe in the power grid myself would restore me to sanity. You don't have to know how it's going to happen. That comes along the way. You don't have to really know much about it. You just have to try to believe that there's a power here that will do that. But the thing is, restore me to sanity. What the hell is sanity? You could read 10 textbooks on mental health and you get 10 different definitions. Oddly enough, insanity is quite easy to define. When the brain, as they say, is under such sufficient and grave conflict, it cannot maintain its neural integrity. It will desperately, in its effort to maintain itself, make parts of reality look different so that it resolves the conflict. The name of that is psychosis. Psychosis, and if you get really a lot of it, is obvious to see, and it puts you away. But most people, psychotics, get just rifle shots of psychotic. You know, things that, like, for example, you read in the paper, a guy says, gee, I lived next door to him for 10 years, nice guy, seemed to get along, came home last night, took a gun and killed all his kids and his wife and himself. I don't know why I did that. Something triggered that psychosis. But here's a good thing. Alcoholics almost never become psychotic. Isn't that amazing? You'd think they'd become psychotic a lot. Almost never. And you might think, well, but they say alcoholism is the second greatest cause of insanity. And it is, but not from that type of psychosis. Alcoholic insanity is something else that you should know about. Anybody in this room that's ever been drunk a lot knows how it feels to wake up in the morning and have to put the fire out. Just think, oh, Jesus, give me something wet and cold. Why is that? Because alcohol is the only fluid I've ever heard of that dries out your body. It kills cells. It's called desiccating cells. It kills the cells in your body where the body broke. And the next day, or whatever you do it, you induce fluids that come alive again. And this happens again and again. They die, you come alive. You die, you come alive. There's only two organs in the body where when the cells die, they never revive. One is your liver, one is your brain. That's why people like us have a lot of liver problems. That's why we have brain problems. So what does it happen to the brain? It takes a long time, a lot of drinking. But it eventually dries out enough of these millions of cells so that you can't function. And it's called the Korsakoff syndrome. And people sometimes say, I think maybe I got this alcoholic insanity, I just feel so terrible. That isn't it at all. That's neurosis. Alcoholic insanity, the Korsakoff syndrome, you won't ever see a case of it. I see them all the time. I wish to hell I didn't. They're sitting on a bed in a ward somewhere. People come and change their diapers, feed them, put them to bed, get them up, feed them, change their diapers, put them to bed, get them up. It's very much like Alzheimer's, except Alzheimer's has the decency to kill the patient. In alcoholic insanity, if your body's healthy, you can sit like that for 50 years. And your family comes down to see if you know them. Gee, Dad, you know us? Get away from me, you sons of bitches, I don't know you. And they cry and go home. That's what alcoholic insanity is. You don't ever want to have that if you can help it. But why don't alcoholics become psychotic? You know why? Because when it gets bad enough, long enough, I will drink alcohol, which alters my perception of reality. You and I have the ability, without even being aware of it, I can induce temporary psychosis. It gets so bad sometimes, scientists say, an alcoholic can get to a point where he literally must drink to preserve his sanity. And yet they say if you drink it, you go insane. And that's the great cul-de-sac of life there. And so I'll drink. Now, so what I have to come to believe in the second step is this. You have to kind of somehow come to believe there's some power here, don't know what it is or how it can work, will enable you to not have to drink to stand it. And the big problem people have is but what is that problem? What is that? What is that power? Don't worry about how it's going to happen. I'll tell you this room is full of people for whom it has happened or they would not be here. They'd be out drinking. So you have to assume it's possible to get it. And the only other thing you got to remember, it seems to me, is that third step, which kept me out of AA again for a long time, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I had to rewrite that in my mind. I said, I will try to do what my sponsor says. And I look back, and that's exactly what the step means, to power grid myself. And I did what he said. And eventually the time came, I was going to almost commit suicide, and he got me to write an inventory. He got me to read it to him. I felt so ashamed. He said, that's the best thing you've done since you got sober, kid. I made amends. I went back to my father. Hadn't talked to him in 10 years. I wanted to punch the son of a bitch in the face and made amends to him because I began to understand his side of it. And that's all I did. And as a result of that, I stayed sober. And I felt better. And you don't really get to be wonderful here, no matter what anybody tells you. Because no matter how hard you work the program and what you do, you never rise above human being. And human beings are erratic sometimes. There isn't a person in this room who will not have a day from time to time where you just say to yourself at 10 o'clock, come on, midnight. Jesus Christ, what a day this is. That's part of being a human being. Because what we do here, we take steps that help us grow into maturity. And if we don't keep doing it, we slide back. It's a funny thing. You know, of the first printing of the book, 7 of the 12 stories in there were written by guys who died drunk. They weren't bad people. They just stopped doing it. They didn't know then they had to keep doing it. This is not like an acute disease like pneumonia where you get better. This is like a chronic disease like diabetes, where unless you keep taking your insulin, you're going to die. And that's what is hard for us to remember. And the people who stop doing it drop by the wayside. It's so hard to understand that sometimes for new people. And the last thing I want to say is that I want to assure you, if you're new, the purpose here is not to stay here, get drier and drier. God, I've been here 47 years. I'd be so dry I'd burst into flame up here. The purpose of AA, to the best of my knowledge, is to very slowly do what alcohol did fast. To little by little change my perception of reality. To make things look different. Remember going back when I was 5 years sober. That was the first time I was able to go back and buy a gravestone for my son. Because up to then I just couldn't stand to think about it. But then I realized the guy that did that terrible thing was not me. It's that crazy bastard who used to live in my body. But little by little to mature. The purpose of AA is to little by little change your relationship to the world around you so you're not living it, coming up from behind all the time. The purpose of AA is to little by little make you stronger and more self-contained inside and them smaller and less threatening. So you're not always semi-afraid. You live in some degree of comfort from time to time. And it's supposed to change your thinking. And it changed my thinking more than I wished it had. When I was 15 years old, I was a marketing director of Beverly Hills and doing quite well. And one day, in some hideous fit of judgment, I left that job. And for the last 32 years, I've been the managing director of the Skid Row mission that threw me out in 1958. And people said, why would you want to give up your great career to run that damn mission? And I could never think of a good answer. I think, well, it was such a significant decrease in salary, I couldn't pass it up. I don't know. But Monday morning, I did what I did Friday morning down in Udall, do I think. I live out by the ocean in West LA, comfortably, nice home, big yard. But I'll get in my car and I'll drive down the Santa Monica Freeway. My car still wants to get off in Beverly Hills. I have to fight it back on. Get down to Skid Row and I park my car in our building. And I walk around the building and step over the bodies of men, women, and children dying from alcoholism and drug addiction and insanity. And I want to just, God damn it, come on, you have to be like that. But nobody ever could do that for me. They got to, and they, I'll go in and we spend the day thinking, how can we help these poor bastards? And I go home to my car and wave goodbye to the ones still alive and go home. And that doesn't sound like a romantic thing, but somehow it makes me feel more like a man than I ever did going down those elevators in my shiny suit being hip, slick, and cool because of the nature of my psyche, I suppose. But I think about that sometimes, you know, because over the years, AA changed me. Little by little, I came to believe in AA is my higher power. And when my sponsor died and I got a new sponsor, he showed me this value of spiritual understanding. And I remember praying for the first time. And I prayed earnestly, and I've been praying ever since. And I came to believe, much to my surprise, that God loved me, no more than you, no less than you. I believe he loves us all the same. And sometimes people say, well, if God loves us all the same, why do you step over a guy who's dying from alcoholism and you're doing so well? Doesn't God love him? Yeah, God loves him. But he refuses to take the action that will enable him to live sober. We have to do these things. That's what they call an action program. So, the only therapeutic I've had since October 31st, 1958 is Alcoholics Anonymous. There's people around in all the groups, always some sidewinder saying, oh, that AA is all right for your drinking problem. What do you do about your emotions? You probably need medication for that. Maybe. I'll tell you, I have been in 2 veterans hospitals for mental problems when I was a young man. I've been committed for an indefinite life to a state insane asylum. I've been in jail 32 times, which is pretty good for an advertising executive, wouldn't you say? I think I can speak on behalf of the emotionally challenged. And speaking on behalf of the emotionally challenged, I'll tell you this. Alcoholics Anonymous and its sponsorship and its action will work at least for 47 years and 9 months. I don't know how much longer, but it works that long. So if you want to hang around and try it, I think you'll be glad. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.